The Green Girl by Colubrina on Archive of Our Own. Chapter 4, Part 1.
Who? Theo passed Drake with a pitcher of pumpkin juice and stared at Millie in confusion. Colin Creevy, the girl said again. You know, the little Gryffindor with the camera who follows Potter around everywhere. Theo flicked a glance at Draco and said, rather dryly, we don't all pay enough attention to Potter to know who the monsters of this fan club are. Well, if he was going up to see Potter in the hospital wing, he had to regrow bones after the game, you know. Because Lockhart bungled fixing his broken arm. And he was petrified. Just like the cat. The kid's annoying, Pansy said. Can't say I'm sorry, I won't run into him and his stupid camera all the time anymore. He's rude, Hermione said with a shrug. It's not like it doesn't occur to him that people might not want that thing shoved in their face all the time. I didn't know he bothered you, Draco said, a dangerous look on his face as she kicked him under the table. I can take care of myself, Draco. Stop with the protective brother crap. Blaise was suddenly taken by a coughing fit, and Hermione stopped talking long enough to squint at him, but he waved her off. He wanted to do portraits of all the Muggle-borns at Hogwarts, and wasn't taking no for an answer. Not, thank you, but I'm not interesting. Not, no. Not, bugger off. She shrugged. I think if you stick that thing in my face again and I'll smash it into a million shards, no reparo in the world would fix it. Finally got through to him. What did he say to that? Draco asked. When Hermione flushed, he glared at her. Tell me, he insisted. I think it's something like stuck-up Slytherin, she snapped. I said he was rude. I heard him, Vincent said, around a mouthful of scone. He said you were a stuck-up Slytherin bitch who thought she was better than everyone else. Hermione shrugged, her mouth tight. Yeah, well, she said. I may be a bitch, but at least I don't harass people to sit for portraits they aren't interested in. Why would you want to be grouped with a bunch of Muggle-borns like that, anyway? Pansy asked. It's not like you have anything in common with them. Exactly, Hermione grinned at the girl. If he'd said he wanted to do portraits of all the second-year Slytherins, I might have been interested. Speaking of Muggles, Daphne said, and Hermione grinned. I'll ask my mom to pick up some more. More Muggles? Theo asked, and all the girls started to giggle. Pansy muttered, Don't worry about it, Theo. It took a few days for Colin Creevy's petrification and what it meant to fully circulate. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened, students whispered to each other. The Muggle-borns are all at risk. Someone goes with her everywhere, Draco insisted. Let the other houses take care of their people. Slytherins protect our own. When Hermione admitted that she planned to stay at Hogwarts over Christmas break, Draco immediately signed up to stay too. Though, he said to her, if I don't bring you home for dinner at least one night, my mother will do that thing where she looks disappointed at me. That doesn't seem like the worst fate ever, Hermione said, and Draco just snorted. The idea of a dueling club interested everyone. For what might be the first time since the start of school, Hermione was eager to go to an extracurricular activity. Learning curses in the abstract was good, but learning how to actually use them, well, that sounded much better. Theo and Blaise both groaned when they saw who was running the club, and Hermione glared at them. Lockhart strode throughout the room, his robes billowing, and she could barely contain a sigh. Blaise glanced over at her and smirked. Snape leaned up against the wall near gathered Slytherins and watched the other professor explain the rules of the club with a condescending sneer on his face. When the two men actually dueled, giving a demonstration before the students began, Snape held out his wand with casual confidence while Lockhart twirled and fussed. She twitched a bit. A duel, she thought, wasn't the place to show off. When Snape snapped, Expelliarmus, and a flash of scarlet light threw Lockhart backwards, she looked at the black-clad, unattractive potions professor with a measuring glance as her housemates cheered for their head of house. Lockhart began to babble on about how that had been a very basic and excellent thing to demonstrate. But didn't Snape feel that? And she tuned him out as she considered the use of disarming her opponent. Would most people see that coming? What made for better offense? Something flashy or something basic brilliantly executed? I think someone's little crush has been crushed, Blaze said in a stage whisper to Draco, who looked over at Hermione and smirked. That was an instructive duel, was all she said. The students were quickly paired off. Hermione was unsurprised to see Snape match Draco and Potter up against each other. When he placed her with some girl from Gryffindor, she gave him a displeased look, and he murmured near her ear, "If I have to take the little twit to the infirmary, I shall be quite annoyed. Keep it settled, Miss Granger." She nodded politely at the other girl, who looked her up and down and said, "I didn't realize muggles got sorted into Slytherin." "They don't," Hermione agreed, "but witches do." "Now," Lockhart was saying, "at the count of 3, disarming only. 1, 2, 3. Hermione had the other girl's wand in her hand by the time the E was fully out of the man's mouth, and she turned to see what was happening with her friends. Potter had hurled a Rictus Sempra at Draco, and she began to seethe. "Disarming only, huh?" Draco had collapsed, giggling at the tickling spell, but still shot off a dancing spell at Potter, began to do a jig. "Enough!" Snape shouted, and ended both enchantments. Hermione tossed the wand back at her worthless opponent and began to head over towards Draco, only to be dragged back by Theo. "He has to do this," Theo hissed. "You can't go protect him." "Potter didn't follow the rules?" Theo asked the question with a sneer. "And this surprises you?" She crossed her arms, but let Theo hold her back. "Let's try this again. Just the one pair," Lockhart was saying. "We'll let you boys show off how to block those unfriendly spells." Lockhart took Harry and began to show him some complicated spell that involved much wiggling of his wand. Hermione eyed him with growing contempt. Meanwhile, Snape was whispering instructions into Draco's ear. When the duel began, Draco shouted out, "Serpent Sortia!" And Hermione watched, rather surprised, as a large black snake appeared from the tip of Draco's wand and began moving towards the frozen Potter. "If you are afraid, Potter," Snape drawled, "I can get rid of it." "Allow me," Lockhart said. With a dramatic flourish of his wand, flung the snake into the air. When it landed right in front of some boy Hermione didn't know, it pulled itself up, ready to strike. Potter hissed some unintelligible thing at the snake, and it collapsed. Hermione looked at Blaze, confused, but the boy was looking at Potter with a coldly measuring expression on his face. She looked back at the scene unfolding before them as the boy who had just been rescued from the snake shouted at Potter and raced from the room. People were finding reasons to move away from Potter, who looked as confused as she felt, until Theo breathed the air into her ear. So, he is a parcel mouth. And then she understood. She looked over at Draco, who smiled at her, then at Snape, who met her questioning look with an inscrutable expression, even as he waved the wand and the snake disappeared into a puff of black smoke. "So now that we know he's a parcel mouth," Draco said, "can we talk about whether he's the heir?" "If we heard him bragging," Hermione said, hesitating over the words, "or we asked him questions about it and he told us, but we'd have to break a lot of rules, have to sneak into the Gryffindor common room and—" "How would we do that?" Draco asked, eyes narrow. "There's a way," she admitted, "but it might be dangerous and—" Theo rolled his eyes. "Do you plan to spit this out anytime soon?" "Polyjuice potion," she blurted. "Professor Snape talked about it in class. Tricky to make, but it transforms you into someone else. We turn ourselves into, well, Weasley and that kid sister of his who's always making eyes at Potter, and no one would know it was us. Potter would tell us anything if he thought that we were a part of his adoring fan club." Theo nodded slowly. "We'd have to work fast. If I'm remembering right, it wears off in about an hour." "How do we get the recipe?" Draco demanded. "Restricted section of the library," she said. "I'll get permission from Snape to do, I don't know, extra credit research on potions. You know he'd give it to me." "He does kind of shamelessly favor you," Draco said. "It's not my fault I'm a good student," she said, tossing her hair. "Merlin," Theo muttered. "Watch where you're throwing that stuff. You could take someone's eye out." "Most potent potions?" Snape asked, eyeing Hermione with a sneer. She, Theo, and Draco stood in front of his desk, and she plastered what she hoped was an innocent inspection on her face. If you plan, Miss Granger, to try your hand at advanced work, I do sincerely hope that you don't plan to steal my supplies and brew things up on the floor of some filthy toilet. She stammered as he pulled out a quill and signed her request form. I shall assign you 1 hour per week to work in my private lab, undisturbed, he said. It is unfortunate that I am not able to provide you with an advanced class to meet your academic needs, but there are so few students with both talent and dedication. It would be little more than private tutoring. As she was choking out her thanks, he waved his hand at them irritably. Go away, Miss Granger, and take your pure-blooded swains with you. I haven't time to help you with whatever little project has piqued your interest, so please try not to kill yourself. He paused. Or make a mess of my lab. I should be most upset to find it in a condition less pristine than the one it was which I left it. Well, Theo said, as they walked away, I think we know which would upset him more, your death or mess in his lab. Oh, I don't know. Hermione looked back to the door of the classroom. I think he'd quite dislike all the paperwork he'd have to fill out if I died in his lab. Hermione had no problems brewing and leaving her potion to sit. Looked longingly back at the well-stocked and immaculate lab before gently closing the door and meeting Theo, her assigned escort for the night. Honestly, she muttered, I'm fine. I really don't need a pureblood escort everywhere I go to protect me from Potter. Theo looked at her and then said, Well, he was found standing over the body of another petrified Muggleborn while you were in there making her potion. So I'm going with, yeah, you don't get left alone. What? She looked at him in shock. How is he even still at school? He was found over the body of a victim, and they're still protecting him? How is that even? Chosen one, Theo said shortly. He got rid of the Dark Lord, so... No body was ever found, she said, and Theo turned and said, his voice sharp, What? Voldemort, she said with patience. They never found a body. I wouldn't call that gone. I'd call that missing.